Welcome back, listeners, to Learning from Friends. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely venture that we like to do together every 2 weeks. You are in for part 3 with Amy talking about her being a middle school counselor. And if you have only listened to part 1 or you've only listened to part 2, make sure you listen to all 3 in order because it makes a big difference to be able to understand the topic at its full extent. So I hope you have enjoyed this conversation just as much as I have. But before we can get back into the conversation, we got to do my mom's quote of the day. Mom, take it away.
Now is no time to think of what you do not have. Think of what you can do with what there is. By Ernest Hemingway from The Old Man and the Sea.
Thank you, Mom, for all that you continue to do for the podcast and with these quotes. And with that being said, let's dive back into the conversation of part 3 with Amy about being a middle school counselor. Are there any other resources or strategies that you utilize to be able to help out with supporting your students?
Yeah, there's a lot of programs out there. You know, we run programs in our school. We run a program called Where Everybody Belongs through the Boomerang Project, and we run Rocks, a group for girls, for ruling our experiences, and we're launching Hope Squad into our schools, a peer-to-peer suicide prevention program. And all of those programs, those are so good and they're important and they're essential and we need to do those things. But at the end of the day, kids want you and want you to be present. They want
Yeah.
you to be visible and they want you to be available. And it sounds so basic. It sounds like, what you mean? I literally just have to go to work. But it's like, yeah, the kids don't care about your meeting and the kids don't care about your paperwork. They just want to know that you're there if they need you. And I have this box in my office and I started it early on in my career and I call it my don't quit box. And
Yeah.
it's a
Love it.
box with a lid and it's just filled with notes from students, parents, teachers. And if I have a hard day, I'll open up that box and I'll read some of those notes as a reminder of why I'm there. And at the end of last school year, a student wrote me a note, and I had worked with this student on some peer issues. And in her note, she said, Mrs. Weinrich, thank you for being visible and available to all students.
What?
And it's like,
Nice.
wow, like that was what you
That's
needed.
huge.
That's what you needed. You
Yeah.
just needed me to be in your spaces to know that I was there for you when you needed to see me. And sometimes kids don't need to come to my office and have an in-depth conversation. Sometimes kids just need eye contact to know, like, I'm okay where I am. And I can
Yes.
be in this classroom, even though it's big and it's scary and I don't like math or I don't like language arts or I don't like history, but I can be in this space because I know that somebody in this building is available and visible to me if I need them. And it sounds so easy, but it's not because you got to be
No.
in a lot
Yeah.
of spaces
Yeah, you
be
do.
visible, but and you gotta go to those hard to reach spaces too, right? Because you could be in the cafeteria and people can see you in the cafeteria, but the way my school is designed, there's some corners and some nooks and crannies, like, you gotta be in those spaces because not every kid likes to be in the cafeteria, and they might have their head
It's
down in
true.
the cafeteria.
It's
But
true.
if I'm by the band room, those kids that might not have seen me in the cafeteria, they might see me near the band room in the hallway. And so you got to be in those spaces. And I think our role gives us a little bit more freedom around that than what teachers have because I can go back in those spaces and I don't have to be back in my classroom after 3 minutes when the bell rings after class change. Like I walk the other side of the school and not be in my office when the bell rings, the tardy bell rings. And sometimes the most beneficial and the best conversations happen after that tardy bell rings because I'm watching that kid struggle with their locker And then I can say, "How long have you been struggling?" Like, and they could say, "I've been struggling all year, and now we're in week 6 and I'm still struggling." It's like, "Okay, we need to work on that." But I might not have seen that if I wasn't in that space. And so we can talk all day about programs and, you know, research and theory and strategy, but at the beginning and the end of the day, kids just wanna see you and know that you're there and be able to say, like, "I'm having a hard day. Can I talk to you?" And that's some of the most powerful work.
I love that. Be present, be visible, be available. That is amazing. And your dope quit box is my this is why I teach folder.
Yeah,
Like everybody has one, everybody has something. And you gotta have those little reminders and have that little stuff there. And that is one of the yeah, as you said, it sounds easy, but it is really hard sometimes to be all three of those things.
yeah,
Because the distractions that are so out there and so just readily in front of you at times that we just forget that. And
yeah. And some days you know, it's important for people to remember that educators are also real people that have real lives, and so
no,
sometimes
you're telling lies. We're not real people.
we're not we live in
Robots.
school and we sleep there.
Exactly, I got a cot in my closet. That's what we have the open door closets for.
And you know what? Sometimes it really feels like that, but,
Yeah.
especially when it's parent-teacher conference night and you're there till 7 o'clock and
Ooh-wee.
you're back to our but for people to realize that, like, some days for me to get out in the hallway is really hard because I might have had something in my own personal life happen that's making it hard for me to be at work that next day, right? So, like I said, we're all human. So we might have a loss in our family and
Yep.
then we have to go back to work the next day. Or you only get, 3 days of bereavement, but then you're back, right? So it's like I didn't even get time to process that before I'm back at work. So some days can be really hard for us to be in those spaces. And I think it's important for especially the adults to realize that all of the adults are people too. And just because I'm not as visible today as I was last week, doesn't mean that I don't care. It's just that I need to take care of myself a little bit first before I can be in those other spaces. And sometimes we have those hard days where it's like, man, today I really just need to work in my office for a little while and do some emails and focus on some of that type of work and not be quite as visible today just because I need to be here and I'll be here when there's a crisis. But like for a little bit, like I just need to be able to work on some of these other things and not
Yeah.
be so on right this second. And for school counselors, it's important for you to be able to recognize those moments in yourself and to not bring yourself down about those moments because you're human too and you're allowed to have those moments. And if you have a loss in your family or if your pet dies, I mean, your pet is part of your family. Like
Oh, yes.
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to spend, the first hour or 2 of your day just working in your office for a little bit before you immerse yourself in the school day. And I think what people sometimes don't realize that don't work in education is that when you are in education, you are on from the moment you open your car door to the moment you drive away. And sometimes before you even open your car door, people are
True.
knocking on your window, like, hey, but it's like we're literally on, and you never know what parent might be in the parking lot there to talk to you about a crisis that morning or what might be going on as soon as you walk in that door, but educators are on from the moment we open the car door and or you might walk in with a teacher and that teacher is like, "I know that being with so and so today, this student is a tough student for me and having them in my classroom today is going to be really hard for me. Like, can you support me in that during that class period?" You never know like what you're going to be asked that day and or what might get shared with you. And I think as counselors, we're in a unique role where we support not only our students and families, but we are also a support for staff members. And I think some of it is the nature of our work, and it's the nature of our personalities, and we're empathetic people, and we care about people, and we want people to be well. But teachers share heavy stuff with us too, and we need to be able to support them, and not just teachers, but our secretaries, or our custodians, or
Staff,
anybody can
just
walk in
general
and
staff, yeah.
share with you and what's going on in their life, and being a listening ear for them is super important, but also, like, recognizing for yourself when either you need to talk to somebody, or you need a colleague to talk to. That's okay for you too. You don't always have to be the hero, and you don't always have to wear your cape to school. And it's okay to be a human, and it's okay to grieve the loss of your pet. And it's okay to want to have a little bit of space in your office in the morning before the kids get there, for you to do a few things to get yourself into work mode. And for me, I like to be at work. Like, my contract starts at 7:30, but I like to be at work at 7:15 because I know everybody else is gonna start walking in at 7:30, and I need, like, that 15
Need that
to,
downtime.
like,
Yep.
put my
Yep.
stuff down and, use the restroom and, like, hang up my coat in the winter and, like, put my lunch in the fridge. Like, I need a little bit of that time because I know at 7:30, like, some things are people are gonna start rolling in, or I've got a meeting or something. So, knowing what you need as a counselor to be able to be on your A game and to be able to be there with kids and for kids and for staff, like, that's super important as a school counselor.
And now you mentioned a second ago with talking about, loss, and that's a very sensitive thing. How do you go about approaching some of these sensitive issues or crises that may involve students or just staff members in general?
Yeah. They can be really heavy, and it can be really heavy really quick. And so a lot of times, like I talked about with being present, a lot of times what people need is somebody to listen. And when you listen, people appreciate that. And I always go back to, we have
Yeah.
two ears and one mouth for a reason, and we need to listen more than we speak. And sometimes people just want to, kids or adults, they just want to be able to cry or share what's going on without being judged, and without somebody asking a million questions, and without somebody feeling like there's pressure to talk more or share more. And a lot of my work is done in silence,
Ah,
where I'm silent and just listening. And sometimes it's silent for both me and the student. I'm listening, and I'm waiting, or things like that. But what's really hard for people is to be in silence.
it
And
is really hard.
it's really hard, and as a school counselor and clinical counselors, they experience this too. You gotta be really comfortable with silence, because
True.
it might take a student 5 minutes of hard crying before they can even tell you what's wrong, before they can even say something happened at home or something happened on the bus. Like, they might need just, like, 5 minutes of silence just to, like, let it out before they can even come to and talk. But a lot of my work is done in silence, and that gives a student or a person space to be able to talk and share when they're ready and what they're ready to share. And we have a process if a student has a crisis, and starting from day 1, we always talk with students about confidentiality. And counselors' offices, school counselors' offices are confidential places, except for 3 things. And we
Okay.
always make sure that students know these 3 things. We post them in our office as a reminder to students in the moment. But those 3 things are: we have to break confidentiality if a student is thinking about hurting themselves or somebody else, if they're having thoughts of hurting themselves or somebody else, if somebody is going to hurt them,
Mhm.
or if there's a legal requirement for us to share, like a subpoena or something
Uh,
like that.
yes.
We have to share, and so when students come in and share things that might be happening at home or things like that, we're not digging for this information. We literally, most like I said, most of our work is in silence and we're ready to hear what students are saying. But sometimes we have to legally call Child Protective Services because that student is getting hurt or because something's happening. And our role as educators and school counselors, and I always share this with teachers and make sure that they know, it's not your job to investigate the situation. It's not your job to figure out if the student's telling the truth or not. Our job is to report, and that's all we can do. We
Yes,
just
yes.
report the facts that the student is saying, and then Child Protective Services does the investigation. We don't do that. But legally, if a student is telling us that somebody's hurting them physically, sexually, or mentally, like, we legally have to report that. The other
Mandated reporters.
mandated report is anybody that works in a school, and people, I think, are surprised by this. Really, it's anybody that works in the public or with the public to know that people are mandated reporters. Everybody from the custodian to the lunch cafeteria crew to the superintendent, teachers, principal, literally everybody that works with children are mandated reporters, daycare staff, even public employees, police officers, like they're all mandated reporters that have to call children's services. So we have that legal obligation. And I think, for the most part, like kids don't always know CPS, things like that, or what has to be reported. But what's hardest for kids is when we have to break confidentiality because they are having thoughts of or are hurting themselves. And it's like, please don't tell my mom. Please don't call my dad. And we have a lot of that, and we have a lot of that emotion from kids, and that's so hard for kids. And we have to talk through that with kids and help them process the fact that we have to call your emergency person. We have to call them because you are experiencing some type of a crisis right now. And, we risk assess kids, right? And so if a kid comes to my office and they're telling me that they're having thoughts about dying, we have a process and we have questions that we ask them, do you have a plan? When were you going to do that? What are you going to use? You know, things like that. And sometimes we have kids that have like very serious specific plans, and that can be really scary when you have that going on. And sometimes kids are just having ideation, like, "I'm having a really hard day and I don't wanna wake up tomorrow," and that is a red flag, and that's concerning.
Yeah.
Anytime, anywhere on that spectrum, I feel like I don't wanna wake up tomorrow because don't think I can face another day, all the way to, I have a specific plan with a date, time, and means. All of that I report to parents because I'm at work until 3 o'clock with that student, but after 3 o'clock, I'm not with that student to keep that student
True.
safe.
True.
I am not with them. And that's what I tell kids is I'm not with you when you leave this school. And so I need to make sure that somebody at home knows that they need to keep you safe and how to keep you safe. And so I always err on the side of caution and let parents know, like, it's not a bad idea to go down to the emergency room and have your child have a mental health evaluation. Like, your child is in crisis right now. And sometimes when I call a parent, sometimes they're aware already. Like when a student says, I feel like I don't want to wake up tomorrow because I'm having a hard day." Sometimes a student might already be linked with and have an outside therapist, and that
Ah,
student's mom or dad, whoever I'm calling, grandma or somebody, they can say, "You know what? She has an appointment with her counselor tomorrow, but I'm so glad you called so I can make sure she's safe tonight until she gets her appointment." Or, we can talk more about that at home, those kinds of things. Sometimes parents are absolutely shocked, like, they've like, literally, they
Never heard it. Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
said that to them before, so they're like, "Oh my gosh," and they panic, rightfully so, and so we talk with the parent about that, what that, can mean and things like that, and we work to help get them linked up to services and things like that, but I always err on the side of caution and, suggest that parents have their child have a mental health evaluation, and in Columbus, we do have Nationwide Children's, and they've recently built a behavioral health building, and it's all behavioral health and mental health crises, and that's what they do there. And so, you know, a lot of times, most times, if a child is having any type of suicidal ideation or cutting themselves or hurting themselves in any way, it doesn't have to be cuts. It could be burns. It could be scrapes. It could be any of those wide variety of things, and they're really, you take each case individually, but I rarely let a student go home on a bus if they're feeling
Yes. Oh, yeah.
we always will have a parent pick them up because we wanna have a clean handoff, and we wanna make sure that that child is going with an adult because a student can get off the bus at the bus stop, but they could walk down the street, right?
Oh, yeah. The bus
We
driver's
don't
got 30 other people on the bus, you know?
we don't know that they're walking to their house. So we need to have a clean handoff. And so I think what's happening now is a sad situation. Children's Hospital doesn't have enough crisis beds. Like they don't have enough beds. And so sometimes I'll think, oh yeah, like Children's is definitely going to keep this student for, at least 3 days and monitor them and make sure they have a crisis plan. And then they'll be at school the next day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the student is at school. Or sometimes a parent will say, "Well, I'm gonna take them down to Children's," and I'm like, "Okay," in my head, I'm thinking, "Okay, they'll be back tomorrow," but then they're not, and Children's is keeping them. I'm like, "Oh, wow." I'm really glad that that child shared more with that clinician at Children's to keep them safe. So
Yeah.
I never really know, and sometimes I'm surprised when the student comes back the next day because I'm like, with the information I share with the parent and things like that, I'm like, wow, I bet I'll be surprised if they come back tomorrow. And then they do. And I'm like, ooh, okay. So then I'm like, okay, I really got to make sure, we check on this kid the next, today and tomorrow, the next day, just to make sure. And if they need to go back, that they go back. Right. But I think literally sometimes I'll have a student that goes to Children's Hospital and I'll talk to the parent the next day and the parent will say, they want to keep my kid and monitor my child, but they don't have any beds. And so right now my
Uh,
child is in the heart unit waiting for a bed in mental health. And I'm like, wow, they're busy. Like they're really
that's
busy.
busy, that's a lot, yeah.
And sometimes they could be, in the heart wing for a week before they get into behavioral health. But just waiting, and that can lead to its own problems because then they're alone and, they go down the rabbit hole. But it's like, wow, the mental health of our youth is a scary place.
It is.
And we try to be, school counselors are often referred to as first responders because sometimes we are the first person that notifies a parent of that information. A lot of times we are, and we're the first people to catch that information. And a lot of times we know that friends share this information with their friends before they're going to share it with the adults in their life. So a lot of our information does come from friends. And it's hard because you want to protect that friend's confidentiality, but you also have to make sure that the other student is safe. And so when I have those conversations with the kid that I'm concerned about, they'll say, "Oh, who told you that?" And I'll say, "Well, I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is that I get information from everybody, and there's a lot of little birdies around this school." And
Yeah.
the custodian that's cleaning and sweeping the lunchroom, he hears stuff that you guys are talking about, and he tells me things. Or when you're in the lunch line, that person putting your meal on a plate, they overheard you telling your friend this information, and they're like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Well,
Like, wow, yeah.
yeah, like, we have ears everywhere, and we find out information, and we don't find out all the information, and where there's things going on in schools that we don't know about, and it's impossible for us to know everything, but when we do know and have that information, then we can intervene and we can help that student and that family get through that crisis and give them resources, because a lot of parents, they don't know what to do when their kid says that. They don't know, like, where do I take my kid? Where do we go? Do we go to urgent care? Do we go to their primary care doctor? Do we go they like People don't know, and you
True.
can't fault them for that, because if they've never lived through that, then they don't know. And so we provide the information and the resources and let them know where they can take their kid to get help. And parents are very grateful for that. And sometimes a kid might be really mad at me, and they might be really mad at me for calling home. And that's okay. And as school counselors, we have to be okay with that. And we have to
Yeah.
know that even though this student is mad at me for calling home, I'm protecting that student, and
Mhm.
that's okay. And so, a lot of times, especially young professionals and young professionals in all fields, they want to be liked, right? They want
Yeah,
people to like
we want that, yeah.
them, and they want, that positive feedback from people. But sometimes you're going to have a student that's mad at you for calling home. And you have to live in that space and be okay with that and know that the next day is a fresh start for both you and the student. And you just continue building that rapport and keeping that great relationship with the student. And we're the adults, and it's not the child's responsibility to maintain the relationship. Like, you got to reach out to the kid and continue to touch base with that kid and be in that kid's space to make sure that you're maintaining that relationship with the kid. That's really
Yeah, and that's a lot to be able to do so and be able to make those decisions, and yeah, as you said, a new day. The next
Yep.
day when you come back in, it's a new day, and they know at the end of the day, it may take them 2 years, 2 days, 2 hours, but they know that you're making the right decision because you need to make that decision for the best of that child.
Yes,
Now
absolutely. And when the other thing too, and it is important for school counselors to know, if you have a student that is suicidal and you are suggesting that their parents take them to the hospital, it's really important for your administrator to know that, because our administrators need to know what's going on with our kids.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the administrators, they don't need to know, the daily friendship conflicts and those things. And they don't need to know who's not getting along with who and all of those things. But when you have a student whose safety is at risk, your administrators, they need to know that information. And, they also have a process, right? And so sometimes, depending on situations, they may inform people above them of safety situations, right? And whether that's involving one student or multiple students, but they need to know that information, because their job is to keep their school a safe place. And if somebody at their school is doing something or engaging in something that's not safe, even if that's a self-harming thing rather than, harming others, your administrators, they need to know that, because they need to know, the conversations you're having with students and parents when it comes to those things. And
Oh,
again,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be, the friendship issue that's happening in the lunchroom. It just needs to be the safety concerns of your building. And it's also good too, if you don't know, if you're on the fence about, does this child need to go to the hospital or not need to go to the hospital? If you're like, it could go either way, I always err on the side of caution, first of all,
Always.
but I
Yep.
also am not afraid to collaborate with another mental health professional, and I'm not afraid to say to my colleague, like, "Hey, the student says these things, like, can you sit in with me while I talk with this kid to make sure that we're both hearing the same thing? Because this is what I'm hearing, but I'm not sure that that's what they're saying." And oftentimes, we do have 2 of us in when we do have a suicidal student, because we wanna make sure when we talk to the parents, we say, like, "2 professionals have heard your child say this, and
Yes.
this is our suggestion." And in my school district, we have school resource officers in all of our, secondary buildings, middles and highs. And so sometimes when we can get the police involved if we need to. I mean, they are police officers, and if we need to get law enforcement involved, we will. And sometimes that can happen in a mental health situation where this is rare. Okay, this is rare where a student will be in a mental
Okay.
crisis with a plan and the parent refuses to take them to the hospital. Okay, that's a rare situation, but if that happens, then the police officer has the legal ability to mandate that that child go to the hospital for 3 days. So the police can step in when they need to in mental health situations, but I mean, like I said, that's rare. It's really rare that we get a parent that's like, "No, I'm not taking my kid down there," but they're there if we need them to be for mental health. But really, I would say for school counselors, like, don't be afraid to collaborate with your people and have 2 people in there when you're doing a suicide assessment. Even if you do, like, the initial part by yourself, just say, like, "Hey, Mrs. So and so is another helper in the building. I just wanna make sure that we all are understanding, what's going on." And the other thing that I give to students is I give students in crisis, I give them the choice. I say, "You have the choice to be in my office with me while I call your parents. Do you wanna be with me, or do you want me to make the call by myself?" And I would say most of the time, kids wanna be in the room because kids wanna know what their parents say when they get that
True.
information, and sometimes kids don't wanna be in the room, and that's okay. I just make sure that they are with another adult. I never leave them alone, and that's another good piece for school people to know. If you any adult, if you have a person that is suicidal, never leave that person alone, ever,
Yes.
until you
Yes.
get them help, because anything can happen so quick. And if something happens in your office because you've chosen to step out and something happens in your office, that's not gonna be good for that student or your school or for you. And so most of the time, kids wanna be in the office with me because they wanna know what their parents say about the situation, but sometimes they don't, and that's okay. We just need to make sure that that student is safe while that phone call is happening. And sometimes parents will be like, "Okay, I'm dropping everything. I'm, like, on my way right this second. I'll be there in 5 minutes." And sometimes the parent's like, "I gotta wrap up this one thing at work, and I'll be there in an hour." It's like, "Okay, we just need to make sure that we have a plan for your child
Yeah.
to get the help that they need to get." And so, counselors, don't be afraid to lean on your people. If you're a new counselor and you're nervous to make that call home to parents for the first time, have your principal with you, have another counselor with you. Don't do it
Mhm.
by yourself. It's okay to ask for help. These are difficult situations. And I mean, I'm going into year 10 and now, I mean, I'm comfortable making that call. That call is never fun. It's never easy, but I'm comfortable doing it now because I've unfortunately had to do it so many times. But just like calls to CPS, like, I will always sit in with another adult to make that call because adults need to know that they're supported, and
Yes. Yep.
and if you feel like you're on an island, that's not good for you, and so you need to know that you're supported. I'm always willing to make calls with people, but I'm also not afraid to ask somebody to sit in with me while I make a call. There's been plenty of times when I know I'm going to call this parent and I've worked with this parent and I know that this parent isn't going to be super happy with this news about their kid's schedule or something, and they're going to be mad. And I'll say, "Hey, principal, I need you to sit in with me while I make this call just because I want you to hear what they say or because I might need you to chime in too." And so they're cool with that. And so just knowing who your people are and being comfortable to one, help others, but also to ask for help, that's okay. You're allowed to ask for help as a professional.
That's phenomenal to be able to have that bit of information and sharing that with us. I deeply appreciate that. Now, what about some ways that you can be able to promote mental health awareness without having to basically directly be postering things up on the wall or having to go individually to one individual student one by one? What are some ways to be able to help kind of promote that within the school community?
So National School Counseling Week is a week. in February, the first full week of February. And I used to think that that was a week where we would recognize school counselors and appreciate them. But then I never really did much during that week. And so then one year, my colleague went to a presentation at a conference about National School Counseling Week, and it really changed her mindset. And she changed my mindset about what National School Counseling Week is. And National School Counseling Week is a great week to recognize the school counselors in your building. We always appreciate somebody saying thank you for the work you do. Just like teachers appreciate being told thank you for the work you do, everybody loves hearing that. But National School Counseling Week is really a time where we can advocate for our role in a school and we can promote the things that we do, because so many people don't know what we do that we use this week to say, this is what we do. We're here to teach stress management skills. We're here to teach all these things. And so during that week, and we use it as mental health too because of stress and things like that, we have something going on every single day of that week that has to do with what we do. And so we kind of have an outline that we kind of follow year to year. And some years we're super ambitious and we go all out. And then other years we're like, gosh, it's February and we need to like tone back and we don't do it as big. But on Monday of that week, we always appreciate our teachers, and we go around to every single classroom and we give every single teacher a snack and a bottle of water or drink. And they're like, wow, shouldn't we be thanking you? And we're like, thank you for saying that, but we also appreciate working with you and we appreciate the work
Yeah.
we do, that you do, and we're here to support you and we want you to know that we appreciate you. And sometimes a teacher will be like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to eat breakfast today. Thank you for that for those muffins." And it's nothing it's never anything super big, right? But when you go to Costco and you buy a case of water and you give a teacher a bottle of water at, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning when they haven't had a chance to refill their water bottle yet, or that you give them a snack and they didn't eat breakfast that morning, like, teachers really appreciate that. And so we always tell teachers that we love being their school counselor and we love working with them. And so
We love having you.
so that's one thing that we do. We work with teachers, and then, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we always kind of shake it up a little bit, but the rest of the week we spend in the cafeteria during lunchtime, and we do things with students that fall into all three of our domains: the academic, social, emotional, and career domains. And one day of the week, we always do like some stress management activities. So we'll have coloring pages out in the lunchroom, or we'll have a puzzle that kids can do, or we bring extra fidgets or stuff like that. Or you mentioned earlier that when you picture school counselors, you picture a lifesaver.
Yep.
And we do see ourselves as lifesavers, and like, we don't always know the lives that we're literally saving, but we give kids lifesavers and we say, come see your school counselor. We're lifesavers. We love to be with you. And we give kids a lifesaver. And if you give a 12-year-old a lifesaver, like, they have had the best day of their life, right? So
Yep, it is a true statement. The little things, man.
like, we give them lifesavers and we give them stickers, and kids in middle school love stickers. You think kids are done with stickers once they leave elementary, but middle school kids, they love stickers and they love to put stickers on their face. And so sometimes teachers are like, oh my God, school counseling week, all the kids have emoji stickers on their face. But you know what? That's okay. And as long as it's not too distracting, the teachers are fine with it. But sometimes we have bubbles in there so kids can blow bubbles and practice their deep breathing, or we get out the big Connect Four game and we have healthy competition going on to play Connect Four. And the teachers love it because we set up the ping pong table. The gym teacher, she pulls out the ping pong table for us and puts it in the staff lounge. So then they get this big ping pong tournament going on in the staff lounge. And it's just
Yeah.
it's just a fun week, and during that time, we also sometimes we'll put announcements on like, "Hey, it's National School Counseling Week. Did you know that your school counselor does this, this, and this?" And, just advocating for our role and letting people know what we do, and people like that, and it's fun, and one of the most fun things that we do is we always do this on the last day, and it seems a little silly, but we like doing it, is we made puzzle pieces out of cardstock, and then we laminated them, and we hide 10 puzzle pieces around the school
Oh, cool.
when there's no kids there, and they say, like, "Being your school counselor rocks," or something like that, and then at the end of the day, we call down the kids who found a puzzle piece and we give them a prize. And so they get it's either a candy bar or a fidget, or they get to pick something, but it's just fun and it gets kids involved and engaged in our work. And it's just a good week to advocate and promote what we do. And teachers love it, kids love it. It's a fun week for us. We've done some pretty ambitious things. One year, well, it's in February, so sometimes it falls right up against Valentine's Day. So one
Aw.
year, we were very ambitious, and we made stickers that had every kid's name on it, and we put them on these hearts, and then we put this bulletin board up, and the kids had to find their name and bring us their heart and get a piece of candy. Okay,
That's
we had,
adorable.
like, 700
That's so
kids.
adorable.
It was a lot of work, okay? And then one year, we're like, "How are we gonna touch on career this week?" And so we had this great idea, and it was a great idea. It was a bulletin board, and it said, what career do you wanna have?" And we hung a pen from the board and then just had blank paper, and kids could write what career they wanted to have. And
Nice.
it started out awesome, 6th grade. Teacher, lawyer, doctor, vet. It was very sweet and innocent, but by the time you get to 8th
It
graders
changes.
a little bit more risk taking, and 8th
Yep.
graders write different things on the board, and we're like, "Whoa, this idea went south really fast."
Really fast. Yeah.
And so we've scrapped that idea because we can't always stand right next to it, to watch, but
True.
it was just, like, a fun way for kids to be thinking differently about what they wanted to do. So it's all just fine. We use that as a big week of advocacy for the program, and school-wide events promote positive behavior for kids and getting kids involved in different things. They just wanna be involved, really, and they wanna be seen, and they wanna get a sticker, and a lot of that can promote just good behavior just in general because the kid knows, "I'm gonna go to the cafeteria today, and my school counselor's gonna be there, and what's she gonna give me today? Because I wanna know," you know? So, they're gonna do their best during the day because they don't wanna
Yeah.
have lunch detention because they wanna come see their school counselor during lunch. So, there's less lunch detentions because kids wanna be in the cafeteria with us, and it's just fun. So that and we also do things specifically to promote good mental health. We do put bulletin boards up about that. We have the crisis text line posted. We share that with kids. We have them in the bathroom with the rip off tabs. So like if you're in the bathroom stall and you're having a crisis, like it's in there, the crisis text line. So kids, we know they're in there with their phones, and we know kids take that step. So yeah, we do a lot to promote that and positive behaviors and things like that.
Now, how do you stay on top of all of this stuff? I mean, there's so many things that you have to be able to stay informed with. How do you keep up with these new developments and best practices being school counselor?
It's a space where, you have professional development as a staff, right? And who are the majority of your staff? They're teachers. And so the professional development is geared for teachers. And that's great because teachers
Mhm.
need professional development just like we need professional development to maintain our licensure and stay abreast on the newest stuff. But sometimes that professional development isn't relevant to our work. So we need to find spaces where we have relevant professional development. And in Ohio, we have a strong school counseling association called the Ohio School Counselor Association, and they partner together with the Ohio Counseling Association. And there's a big conference every year, and it's called the All Ohio Counselors Conference, and it's a mix of school counselors and clinical counselors, and it's only counselors. And that's great because, social workers do great work and school psychs do great work, but it's really great when you have a place where it's just counselors and you can talk with other counselors about what's going on in the world of counseling. And it's a 3-day event, and the first day, are longer sessions, but then the second and third day, they're smaller, hour-long sessions, and you go to the sessions and you learn about what are other school counselors doing, what's effective, what do I wanna do, what do I need? I'm seeing a lot of kids with this issue, but I don't really know what to do with it, so I'm gonna go to a session about that issue so I can learn about what to do with these kids experiencing that. And it's really a great time of collaboration, learning new material, and re-energizing. And my colleague and I, we have had been talking for years, like, we should really present about what we do because, we do great things and nobody knows about it. And the things that people get the most out of at these conferences are practical things that they can leave all Ohio and go to their school building and implement. That's what school counselors want. And so a couple years ago, we started presenting together as a duo, and we have presented for 2 years in a row. And we just got a proposal accepted for this year, too. So we're presenting again this year.
Oh, wow.
And thank you, and it's really fun to present, and, people are the number one fear in America is public speaking, right? And so people get really nervous to present, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, I would never present." And the thing I love about presenting is, even though I get butterflies beforehand, is that you get to talk about what you're passionate about and what you love to do, and you get to share that with people, and then people can take that information and go do with that in their buildings what they wanna do with that. And, sometimes, after a conference, we always share email and stuff with them, with the participants. I'll get an email like, "Hey, I really love this idea, but I'm struggling to implement it. What do you suggest?" And so it creates new relationships among professionals, and it puts you in spaces with other people that are experiencing the same thing as you. And so that conference is really a great place to be. And it also does keep us on top of what's going on with our profession. The legislative team is there. Our Ohio School Counseling Association has a legislative team. And so that team always presents on, the current House bills or what's coming down the pike. And it's really informative, and I always go to those sessions because a lot of that stuff has impact on our day-to-day work with kids, and so being aware of that legislation that's coming is really important. And so that's the best professional development for us at a local level is the Ohio School Counseling Association, that All Ohio Conference. There's also a national one, and
Nice.
that the American School Counseling Association puts on, and it's in a different state every year. This year is in Kansas City, Missouri, and I haven't made it to one of those conferences yet, but I really want to, just because it's awesome to connect with Ohio counselors, but to connect with other counselors across the country, is also really cool. Would be really cool too to know what's going on in different states and what strategies they're doing because they're doing great things too, and we want to learn about those. So I'm really excited because in 2027 the American School Counseling Association conference is gonna be in Columbus, so if I don't make it before then, I will be going in 2027, and maybe I'll be presenting. Who knows? But, yeah, I mean, it's just good to be with other people in your field and talking about what's going on in your world.
Now you've been involved for 10 years, involved in this career. How do you see the role of the school counselor evolving and changing as time goes along?
It feels like sometimes, why do I have to advocate for my role? Why do I feel like I have to fight to be here? Teachers aren't, saying, "Oh, teachers are necessary," because we all know teachers are necessary. but fighting to get our ratio down and things like that. But where we are now has all come from the advocacy of the people before us and the people that have been in the field longer than us or those that have retired. And so I just see more and more progress that's going to happen in our field with the strong organizations that we have and getting some of those other duties as assigned removed from our plates. And North Carolina is a unique state in that there's legislation that their school counselors cannot be state test coordinators. And that is huge for school counselors in North Carolina. And being in some of the, Facebook groups and stuff like that, North Carolina counselors do still get involved with state testing. They might help in different capacities, but they don't have the same role that we have when it comes to state testing, and that's all because their state organizations have been advocating for them, and so that's huge progress for them, and so my hope is that that will flow into other states as well to get some of those other duties as assigned taken off of our plates so that we can spend more time with the students on the preventative programs and the skill building that we know that kids need. So the American School Counselor Association that keeps up with relevant information and resources, and so school counselors being involved with that is really important, and just making sure that what you do is known, and people who are not school counselors but who either work with school counselors or have a kid in school, like making sure that people know that your school counselor is important and that the people making hiring decisions know that your school counselors are important people and an important role. And so having a good team behind you that supports you and talks, about the importance of school counselors is really important. And that's what's going to continue to move our profession forward. And that's what's going to get our ratios down to manageable places where we can be with all students and that every student has access to a school counselor. Every student deserves access to a school counselor, and we've got to get our ratios down so that all students do have equal access to school counselors.
There you go. That is a huge piece of there with and whether it's in the classroom, whether it is in the school building for
Yeah.
counselors, everything, our ratios, man, ratios that falls over everywhere of enough to be able to make sure we're spending with everybody. Now, as we start to kind of wind down here, are there some literature or recommendations that you like to provide for some people if they're learning more about maybe becoming a counselor?
Yeah, so the American School Counselor Association and state level associations are available to those to professionals. Also, graduate students who are in school counseling programs can be members of the associations. And those that are interested in being a school counselor, check out the associations because there's a lot of information about what a school counselor's role is, what it should be. A lot of it is just public on their website. When you're a member of the organization, you do have more access to some different things, but a lot of it is just available to the public to know about and learn about that. Learn about the career. I would say too, if you have kids, talk to the school counselor at your child's school. Ask them what they're doing and how they're supporting kids. Call them and let them know that your kid is struggling so that they know to keep an eye on your student. That's so important for school counselors, and most school counselors that I've ever talked to, they love their job. They want to talk about the career, they want to talk about the profession, and they want more people in it. So talking to school counselors about what they do, appreciating them for the work that they do. I always tell other school counselors, like, hey, thanks for doing what you do. I know that I'm also a school counselor,
Yeah.
but my own kid's school counselor, like, thank you for doing what you do. It's hard work. And so just acknowledging that is important. And then also, social media has a lot of groups for school counselors. So get into those spaces, ask questions. School counselors want to answer those questions for you. And we want you to know what we're doing and how we're helping kids. And so don't be afraid, to ask those things and be involved in those spaces.
Now, there's a lot that we have covered. I mean, we've talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything that maybe that I overlooked that you'd like to discuss maybe?
Yeah, so there was one other kind of myth that I wanted to debunk a little bit, and that is that in the school setting, sometimes parents might think that we are able to provide therapy for their child at school, but this is not true. We are more of tier one level support. And so if a student needs therapy, they really need to be treated outside of school in a mental health setting. That could be outpatient or things like that. But in the school setting, with school counselors, we don't diagnose or treat mental health disorders, but we are absolutely part of the student support team. And with permission from parents, we collaborate with outside therapists to help students get the support that they need at school. So outside therapists, they'll share strategies that works for a student and we'll work on that with the student and then we can communicate back with the therapist. But we're not providing therapy in schools. And so I think that's one thing that parents need to be aware of. And also just other educators in general, because they don't know what we're doing. And so just to be clear, that's not what we're doing. But the other thing that is a big misconception is that, and this is one thing too that the American School Counselor Association has done research on and has really been advocating for, is the misconception is that anyone with a mental health or an educator license can be hired to be a school counselor. And that is an absolute myth. School counselors have completed a master's level program of 48 to 60 credit hours, and it's a unique license that needs to be held. And so in
Ah,
some districts we see that they will hire in social workers or school psychologists and put them into a school counselor role because districts just may not be aware that the school counselor license is a unique license. And so school social workers and school psychologists are very important roles, and we need to have those people in our schools, but they need to be in the correct role because what we see is that when social workers or school psychs or other professionals are put into school counselor roles, is that it's a disservice to the students and the school because they don't have the same training and education that school counselors have. And so when you don't have the same training, you can't do the same job and you can't take that title. So I'm a licensed school counselor. And so I would never go in and be a school social worker or a school psychologist because I don't have a license for that. And so
yeah.
it's really important that people understand that when you put people with the wrong licensure into a title, you're not serving your students. And
Exactly,
so
exactly.
it's really important that people understand that school counselor programs are designed for school counselors, and we have this training that others don't have and this education. And so it's really important that we advocate for our role that only school counselors get hired in as school counselors and use that title because we don't want things to fall through the cracks. And sometimes when you put people with the wrong licensure into that role, some things can fall through the cracks. Just like if I got hired in as a school psychologist, I don't have the same training as a school psychologist, so I'm not going to be able to do that role well because I'm not trained to do that role. And you can learn some things on the job and things like that, but that background knowledge that you gain in graduate school and in your internships, that shapes your role as a school counselor. And it's really important that we focus on putting the correctly licensed people into the correct roles to serve our students the best that they can and the best that they deserve.
That is perfect. That is wonderful bit of knowledge there that my brain doesn't think about that at times, and being just reminded that again, that's the point why a lot of people we assume, and you never should assume these things whenever it comes to one or the other. And thank you for giving us that information. And you've dropped a lot of amazing knowledge on us throughout this episode. Is there any last minute words of wisdom before we leave out today?
Yeah, if you're an educator or if you have children, if you work with children, get to know the school counselor that you're working with and figure out what their role is and ask them what they do and what their role is and ask them, how you can support them and talk about ways that they can support you because we want to help. We want to help students, we want to help teachers, we want to help families. And for anybody that wants to be a school counselor, learn about school counseling, learn about the profession, talk to school counselors and get to know what you can do and the impact that you can have. And for other school counselors, keep doing what you're doing because you rock and you're rock stars and and we need you and we want you to keep being in your school and being in your space because you are impacting students and you are doing important work and just keep doing what you're doing.
I love it. Now, if someone wanted to be able to reach out and ask maybe a question or two, or was just curious about getting some information, how could someone be able to locate you?
Well, Facebook is a good place to start, even though my profile is pretty locked down. But Messenger is good, or via email would be okay too. With my email, amy.weinrich1@gmail.com, people could reach out. I'm really passionate about my work, so I'd love to talk about it and connect with people who are school counselors, want to be school counselors, know a school counselor. Yeah, that would be how to do it.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you're gonna get a flood of emails here that are gonna come through because you dropped a lot of amazing knowledge and a lot of passion in your voice. And so look forward to hearing back from, how people kind of reach out. With that, Amy, I wanna thank you for this time, and you shared so much great knowledge with this community out here. So from the bottom of my heart, I deeply appreciate you coming on and spending your Sunday morning with me.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for having me. It's been a fun time.
And as those that want to be able to reach out to me, I have my email. It's just cade, CADE, at learningfromfriends.com. I've got a Facebook page, a Twitter page, with now X. Sorry, got to keep up with the times, guys. My bad. And then I've got a LinkedIn page in an Instagram page, which are all Learning from Friends podcast. I do have a Patreon page as well. If you would like to be able to make a donation or purchase merchandise, I do have a T-shirt. If you would like to be able to purchase a T-shirt to be able to sponsor that way. But my biggest request of you, the listeners, is to share this with a loved one, share it with a friend, share it with an acquaintance, because if that's the biggest thing, to be able to share knowledge is through word of mouth is the best way to do so. So as we leave out here today, we all know it's coming to an end when you hear the catchphrase. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely adventure that I like to call Learning from Friends. And most of all, don't forget to let your curiosity fly high.